Hey, Steve Saretsky here. This is the Friday market update video. We're basically every Friday going to recap things you need to watch for in the Canadian real estate market, obviously with a particular focus on Vancouver. If you like these videos, hit subscribe. Obviously appreciate the love. I also want to hear your comments below. Let me know what you're seeing in the market, what you think. If you have any questions, we'll banter back and forth. Basically want to touch on a report that I put out on my site the other day, which was referencing some data from one of the Canadian government agencies, basically stating that Canada, of all the advanced economies in the world, over the past 5 years, Canada has accumulated more private debt than any other advanced economy in the past 5 years. So again, in the past 5 years, of all the advanced economies, Canada's accumulated the most private debt. And if you've been watching these videos, this is something I've been talking about relentlessly because unfortunately it doesn't get any airtime. A lot of people don't understand it. Economists, developers, people in the real estate industry, they don't understand the direct correlation between growing household debt and asset prices. There is a direct correlation between household debt and high house prices. So household debt tends to be mortgage debt, a lot of it, or home equity lines of credit. And this allows you, obviously, as your debt is growing, as mortgages continue to grow, as they're growing right now about 6% every single month, that allows higher house prices. Again, if your income is stagnant and house prices are increasing like they are in Vancouver by 25% a year, realistically, the only way to afford that is to take on a bigger mortgage. So, whether it was 10, 15 years ago where you could only take out 3 or 4 times your income, now it's 7 times your income. You're basically able to take on more leverage. You're able to grow your household debt, which supports the higher asset price. So, in simpler terms, and just to quickly touch on that, because people make the counter argument that they don't understand the debt. So they try to make a counter argument saying, well, it doesn't matter that debt's going up because your equity, your asset is going up, as if the two aren't directly correlated. Obviously, your house price is going up if your debt's going up. Anyways, so to explain it further, again, if you didn't watch my money creation video earlier this week, go check that out. But I'm going to put in a 2-minute video clip right now, which is basically going to explain the direct correlation between money creation, household debt, and its direct correlation between house prices. So I'm going to loop this 2 or 3 minute video in here, watch that, and I'll basically touch on it now. So here it is.
Why are house prices so high? In the 10 years up to the start of the financial crisis, house prices rose by over 200%. Why? A common belief is that there are too many people, too much immigration, and too few houses to go around. This is a myth. In fact, during this time, for every 4 new people, we built 3 new homes. At the same time, mortgage lending grew by over 370%. So, where did we find all this money to buy houses? When you take out a mortgage, the money doesn't actually come from someone else's savings. No, it's actually just created electronically by your bank typing numbers into a computer. And it's those newly created numbers or newly created money that you can use to pay for your new house. Since every mortgage works this way, all the crazy lending before the crisis created hundreds of billions of brand new money. And this new money flooded into property, pushing house prices up so high. Everyone pays more for a place to live, which means that after paying the mortgage or the rent, there's less money to pay the bills, and less money to spend with businesses and shops in your town. So, high house prices don't make us richer, they make us poorer. Well, actually, not all of us. High prices and big mortgages mean bigger profits for the banks. And with an effective license to print money, this guarantees they'll lend too much. So So if you want to keep houses affordable for ordinary people, we have to look to the banks and together take away their power to create money for good.
So anyways, I hope that helped. If you guys have any questions on debt, put it below. But basically, as I've mentioned numerous times, probably the best book on this is called House of Debt. It talks about the direct relationship between household debt and asset prices. Check out Professor Steve Keen. Now, again, the Bank of England is one of the first central banks to figure out this direct correlation between household indebtedness and rising house prices. Unfortunately, a lot of the mainstream economists have not yet figured this out, and I think it is obviously it's an issue because most people don't understand it, and it's like how can we tackle the actual issues of ever escalating house prices without actually understanding the underlying causes, basically. Since 2008, if you take the private, which is the most influential, which is the worst kind of debt you can have, it's consumer private debt, and you take public debt, government debt, you add the two together, that debt has been growing by 22% per year since 2008 in Canada. So again, everyone's like, oh, well, like Canada was able to avoid basically a financial crisis like much of the other world experienced, whether that was the US, Ireland, etc. But again, as I said, we basically borrowed time. They doubled down on the debt. It grew 22% a year, and you basically kicked it down the road. And so this is why every politician basically is kind of intervening with the housing market, but not really, because they don't really want to touch it. They don't want that unwinding on their watch. I mean, like, realistically, think about it. Like, Trudeau, if he wanted to, hypothetically, could throw in like 5 or 6 policies tomorrow and bring house prices down if he wanted to. But again, they don't. There's tax revenues involved. There's the entire Canadian economy involved. But at some point, that household debt is going to have to delever. And so if you go back and look at that post that I put out, that Canada has accumulated the most debt in the past 5 years, the economies which have accumulated the least amount of debt in the private sector over the past 5 years are all the economies that deleveraged in 2008. So all the households that deleveraged the household debt in 2008 they've gone through, like, that's Ireland is one of them, I believe, the States, and then the UK. So their private debt is like, it's barely growing right now because they deleveraged that all back in 2008. Anyways, I'm not going to ramble too much on that, but hopefully that video helped. You can go read that blog, study up on it. I recommend just honestly ordering a book on Amazon, House of Debt. And this is not to say like that there's an imminent housing crash coming or anything like that. It's more so just understanding like what's the underlying issue, right? I mean, obviously we always want to talk about foreign buyers and like beautiful city. I think the whole population myth is probably one of the biggest fallacies out there. If you actually look at it, there's a huge amount of boomer population that's dying off, particularly in Canada, particularly in BC, where they're having to basically up their immigration numbers to support a growing population. But the population has been growing at normal levels. There hasn't really been any uptick in the past 5 or 6 years. It's been very minimal. And a lot of that population growth, a lot of people moving from different provinces, say, into Vancouver, is because the economy here is booming, and that's primarily because we have rising asset prices, which again creates sort of that wealth effect. But yeah, that's basically just understanding where things are at. You can make the decision then when you understand what's moving markets, is you can make the decision for yourself to figure out what is best. Now, I certainly have lots of clients that are buying investment properties that they see it as a hedge against potential inflation. Obviously, your money's not making your money's not making anything in the bank, but then I have people that are pulling risk off the table, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. It's ultimately your decision to make. And just getting back to the markets quickly, just again understanding where we are at, I think in this real estate cycle, as of October, so I've been talking about how hot the Vancouver condo market is. All the growth now is coming at that entry level. So the largest price accelerations was in the studio condo market. So that's studio condos in 2017 for Vancouver have grown 24% this year alone. They've grown 24% in 2017, whereas 3 bedrooms have only grown by 8%, which is obviously still very, very good. 2 bedrooms, I think, are around 15% or 18%, something like that. But all that growth is coming from that entry level. You have basically what that is a lot of first-time buyers just trying to get into the market by all means necessary. You have a lot of investors which are speculating on the market. Obviously, there's that ingrained mentality now where prices are going to continue to rise and they can never come down. So everybody's just trying to get in, and that's really like the entry point for a lot of people if they're taking equity out of their homes, etc. Is those studio condos in Vancouver around 400, 500,000 are still within reach. And then everything that's getting more expensive, a lot of it does rely on foreign capital. The detached market is quite soft right now. As you can see, 3 bedrooms only up 8%. So I find that very, very interesting to see where we are. I think a lot of the price acceleration from that high side is slowly pushing down. I think that the stress test could potentially add further to that in January. I think that the detached market, that higher end stuff, is a lot of it is dependent on some sort of mortgage, and if you're reducing borrowing power by 20%, does that push people further down the ladder into the condo market, into 1-bedroom studios? Again, that's where all the growth is basically happening right now. I talked about this last week. Surrey condos is, it's going through its basically euphoria moment where their prices are increasing by 3% every single month. I mean, I don't see how that's sustainable, but that's where we are in the markets. Again, household debt, private debt, we've accumulated the most in the past 5 years of any other advanced economy. Studio condos are up 24% so far this year. We're in a very interesting, precarious situation where the whole world is really paying attention to this and watching Canada. We'll have to, I'll continue to be here every Friday updating you on things that I find interesting, updating you on the situation, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you got some value out of it, and I'll see you next week.